Hello?
Hello. Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Morning, Bob. So now that we have Awanati in our little group, we'll be under control. Now they'll really take care of us. That's
Sorry,
right.
sorry that took I don't know what happened. See if we can figure this out. Levon or Kristen, are we at quorum?
Hey, Awanate, this is Kristen. I'm not sure yet. I think we're still trying to get hooked up here.
Got it. Okay.
We
I'll,
haven't done a roll call yet.
I'll wait for the high sign from you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So now I don't think you. Thank you. Yeah. So. How are you? Yeah, how are you? I want to say we are at 10. We are just waiting for Mandy to join virtually.
Got it. Thank you.
Amy or Levon, are you able to see or at least hear everyone on the line?
We can hear them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You hear us? We can.
Recording in progress.
If you wanted to, or we could wait for the tech issues to get sorted.
Why don't we just get started so we can hear each other?
Okay.
In the interest of everyone's time, let's get started and we'll figure out the video along the way if that's
Sounds great.
acceptable.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So good morning. At this time, I'd like to call to order the September 25th, 2024 meeting of the Executive Committee to confirm quorum and attendance. I will ask either Levon or Kristen to conduct a roll call vote.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will go ahead and do attendance for us. Miss Artizana.
I'm here and in Dearborn.
Thank you. Miss Bliss or Mayor Bliss.
Yep. Here.
Mr. Cabina.
Here.
Miss Flynn. Miss Gonzalez. Miss Hamoud.
Here.
Mayor Hopewell.
He's here because we need to step down.
Okay. Is Miss Flynn, Miss Gonzalez in the room?
She's not going to be here today.
Okay.
Miss
Right.
Gonzalez.
Hello, Gonzalez.
Do we need to use the microphone?
I don't think we should need to, right, Ian?
We're not sure with the audio in this room. Sorry.
I'm loud. So
No, now that I can see you, that's helpful. So I can check. Okay. You said Mayor Hopewell is there. However, he stepped out of the room.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Lutz.
I'm here.
Mr. McLaughlin, Dr. McMahon,
Yes, here.
Miss Montgomery Tabron, Mayor Neely, Dr. Ono,
Here.
Dr. Pink. I believe he's not here today. Mr. Rich, Mr. Sutherland,
Here.
Miss Thorson,
Yes.
Miss Tomina, Miss Walker Miller. You do have a quorum, Mr. Chair, just by a hair for now.
Kristen, it's Mike McLaughlin. I've joined.
Thank you, Mike. You
Great.
can go ahead and get started.
Excellent. So we will go through the meeting in a second. Are there any communications from the secretary?
Just one, we did receive some written public comment yesterday, and that was circulated to executive committee members yesterday, September 24th. So that should be in your inboxes.
Great. Thank you very much. And with that, we will open up the meeting for public comment. And let me provide some opening remarks. So I want to thank you all for joining today, and my apologies for any technical issues that we may or may not be experiencing, and for starting a couple minutes late here. We are going to try to make it through the meeting as effectively as possible. And with that, I will turn back to the agenda. The Uniform Budget and Accounting Act requires that there be a public hearing on the proposed budget prior to adoption or approval of the budget. We will now hold the formal public hearing on the proposed budget. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, I will first ask for public comment from anyone who is attending the meeting in person. Is there anyone attending in person that wishes to provide public comment? And given the fact that I am on the line, please also state your name for the record.
No one in the room, Chairman.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone participating online or by phone that wishes to provide public comment? Again, please provide your name prior to speaking. Great.
Comments related to on the budget specifically?
Correct, on the budget specifically, and we'll turn to general public comment next. Great. We will now provide an opportunity for general public comment. Please keep your public comments to 3 minutes or less. We have a timer here. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, I will first ask for public comment from anyone who is attending the meeting in person. Is there anyone attending the meeting in person who would like to provide a general public comment?
No one in person.
Great. Is there anyone participating online or on the phone that would like to provide a general public comment?
I would not say we have 4 people registered for public comment. With in-person public comment ended, we will open the meeting for virtual public comment. If you are pre-registered, I will call your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number to signal your turn to speak. Once prompted, you may use the raise hand function and I will prompt you to unmute your microphone. The first registered public comment is phone number ending in 3477. They do not appear to be on the line. The next public comment is Brandy Sweet, with phone number ending in 1458. Brandy on the phone. Go ahead, Brandy, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
It was really My name is Brandy Sweet, and I feel it was really unprofessional and possibly illegal that the executive committee meeting in March denied virtual participation. Numerous people were never allowed access, and were stuck in the waiting room. Then July's meeting had no option to even attend virtually and was held in Midland. The MEDC has been implementing new ways to silence residents, all while proclaiming you are expanding opportunity for public input, not opposing input, that's for sure. There is no accountability or transparency, and as I've pointed out numerous other times, there is absolutely no environmental consideration occurring here, which should be happening prior to allowing taxpayer dollars to potentially hazardous developments. For example, projects like Goshen, Marshall Megasite, Mundy Megasite, Shawasi, and most recently wanting to fund the Copperwood Mine Project in the UP. Who here is overseeing these megasites and ignoring local concerns, risking Michigan's natural environment and the residents' health by doing nothing but handing money to toxic greed energy developments with absolutely no safeguards put in place? Your talent action team needs to be replaced with people who care and understand that nature is business in Michigan. If hard data talks, then you'll want to know that these natural amenities also draw domestic and global tourism to our doorstep. Tourism is the third largest industry in Michigan, accounting for nearly 50 billion in economic activity, over 320,000 jobs, and 14.2 billion in wages. 1 out of 18 jobs in Michigan is driven by tourist industry, according to Travel Michigan, and you're risking it all. The MEDC is only damaging pure Michigan. Most residents are against economic development, but what good is it without the health of our environment and citizens? Environmental impact statements should be made mandatory prior to handing over taxpayer dollars. Not only are we funding these developments, we have to live with the aftermath. The potential jobs and growth isn't enough for Michiganders. We also want to know our air, land, and water will be protected in the process. Goshen is completely behind in every aspect. They told us community members groundbreaking would occur in July 2023 and proclaimed environmental studies were happening or completed, which was and still is untrue. Goshen is at the beginning stages and is way off on their given time frame. They still haven't even submitted their permit applications to Eagle. They're having trouble figuring out how to fill in and relocate over 60 acres of pristine wetlands and cold transitional streams out of a major flood zone that attaches to the Muskegon River, Michigan's second largest river. All we get is the VP spokesperson for Goshen, Chuck Thielen, literally sucking battery chemicals off his finger at the township meeting to supposedly prove that the factory will be safe. Real professional coming from the state of Michigan, backed by Governor Whitmer and her minions here. You all are constantly ignoring questions and concerns you have for over a year, but I'll ask again, where can we find Goshen's updated time frame that milestones must be completed by? When will callbacks kick in? I'll just say that the CCP aspect has been getting a lot of the attention in the media, but get ready.
Thank you for your comments, Brandy. We'll now move on to Leah Davis, ending in number 9850. Go ahead, Leah. Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties getting you unmuted. Can you please try to press *6 to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead with your comments.
So my boast is in the Lord. Where is your security? In today's society, man-made laws have become merely a curse among humankind and its brethren. Do you not fear the laws of God? The grace of the Lord urges us to examine the scriptures inspired by men of the Holy Spirit to guide us into his mercy and will before it's too late to turn the tide. It is wise to present ourselves as humble servants before the counsel of the Almighty. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, not man-made fraudulent governments. The members of this board are not elected officials but appointed by Gretchen Whitmer, who vote unanimously to spend millions and billions of our tax dollars for an agenda not of the will of the residents of Michigan. Everything you vote for is an oppression on the people who live in areas you plan for your big corporate manufacturing. Heavy industry bulldozing its way onto mega site-size agriculture and residential areas without the people's consent. Are you always this rude to your very own family and friends? When it's all said and done, we the people of Michigan who have been stolen from by you and taken advantage of by you will not forget what you've done to our land, water, natural habitat, property value, and way of living. When your plan backfires, you will have no one to blame but yourself because you've been warned more than several times by the people who you ignore and refuse to listen to. You can't stop all over the heads of individual citizens and expect a blessing from a gracious, righteous God. I'm not even sure how it is you're able to sleep at night with a clear conscience. Last time I checked, doing the bidding of big government against the will of the people is known as tyranny. You will all go down in Michigan history as the public body that swindled the taxpayers, polluted the Great Lakes, and sold out our state to foreign entities. Have a good day.
Thank you. We will now move to Marjorie Steele with phone number ending in 8944.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Marjorie Steele. I am the founder of the Economic Development Responsibility Alliance of Michigan. I'm also a resident of Mecosta County. I would like to read a definition by a global group called Eco Resolution. This is a definition of corporate colonialism, and I believe it's highly salient to just about all of the projects that have been on y'all's docket for the last 12 months or so. For many Indigenous communities, land is not only the foundation of their livelihood and right to self-determination, but essential to their spirituality and cultural identities. However, this sacred connection has not prevented the rise of what's known as corporate colonialism or neocolonialism, a contemporary form of past imperial land grabs when Native peoples were forced off their territories and onto restricted reservations. Corporate colonialism allows businesses built on extracting natural resources for profit to use their might as means to take over occupied or foreign land, exploiting economic weaknesses to influence governments therein, who are often all too happy to trade land for foreign investment, even at the expense of local people's livelihoods. The land sold to investors is typically stolen or coerced from Indigenous people without their consent or under financial duress, and commonly leads to their removal. The takeover of Indigenous lands by extractive and industrial corporations also causes profound environmental degradation on what are meant to be protected territories, waters, and ecologies. As such, it is widely seen as theft among local communities. These presumed sanctuaries for Indigenous groups and rural communities rich with water and natural resources remain under threat from gas, oil, timber, and renewable energy firms looking to extract natural resources for profit. I understand that the traditional framework of understanding colonialism applies to Indigenous people, and I believe that that is an accurate usage here. Rural residents, some of whom who have been 7th-generation farmers, are, for all intents and purposes, have become the modern Indigenous people of this land, and these projects are doing precisely what this description describes to us. So I would like all of you to take a beat and consider the larger implications of these projects, not just on Michigan, but also on your own careers. Thank you so much for your time.
That concludes our virtual public comment period for today's meeting, and I will turn it back over to you, Alnate.
Great. Thank you to all of our commenters, and thank you, Levon, for facilitating those comments. At this time, we would like to do three things. One is welcome some of our new members. Secondly is to give a couple of subcommittee updates. And thirdly, we'll move on to the approval of the July 16th meeting minutes. Number one, would like to welcome Sarah Gonzalez from Delta Airlines and Renee Tomina from DTE to the executive committee. Hopefully, we thank you in advance for your time commitment and your focus on this, and we know that you will bring a lot of good insight to these meetings. So welcome, and wish I was there in person to welcome you as well. Also, want to reiterate our welcome to Mayor Bliss from Grand Rapids, who joined us prior to the last meeting, but I know that not all of you were able to make it. So welcome, Mayor Bliss, as well. Regarding subcommittees, we've had a little bit of movement on those, given our new members. We have added Carla Walker-Miller to personnel and compensation, Fadwa Hamoud to finance. Both of those occurred before the last meeting. Dr. Ono has joined strategic planning, and Bob Sutherland on audit and governance. And then lastly, we moved Brian Rich to the finance subcommittee as well, to make sure that we had enough members there for subcommittee quorum. With that, we will turn to the meeting minutes. As always, due to the hybrid nature of this meeting and to ensure accuracy for the meeting minutes, I'd ask that you please identify yourself before offering a motion. All votes will be taken by roll call. Ms. Armstrong will facilitate that. Attached to your packet are the meeting minutes from July 16th, 2024. Are there any edits or changes that need to be made to the meeting minutes? If none, I would entertain a motion for approval of those minutes.
This is Mayor,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor Neely.
Mayor Neely, so move.
This is Beth Artisan. I'll support.
Great. We have a motion from Mayor Neely and support by Beth Artisana. Are there any additional questions or discussion necessary before the roll call vote? Great. Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Artizana,
4.
Mayor Bliss,
Yes.
Mr. Cabina,
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez. You might have to unmute a mic. I can't hear the in the room.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Hamoud,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Ono. Did we lose Dr. Ono? Oh, there you are. Thank you. Mr. Sutherland,
Yes.
Ms. Thorson.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Armstrong. With that, we will turn to Quentin and Jill for the budget presentation.
Good morning. Want to welcome again our new executive committee members and thank our volunteer executive committee members for joining. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jill, our CFO, to walk over the budget. But more importantly, I want to make sure that you all understand that we're executing the Making of Michigan Economic Development Strategy, focus on attracting and developing people, cultivating or revitalizing places, and then competing for and winning projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to our CFO. Thank you.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me fine? Okay. So in your packet, you will see the proposed FY 2025 corporate budget. For FY 25, the total funding that we're proposing is $92.5 million, which is a slight decrease from last year, about $1.5 million. Ongoing requests, we're asking, about a 6.2 million increase related to ongoing. And with one-time new programs, we decreased that request by 7.6 million. We will get into more details on that as we go through the presentation. But just overall for FY 2025 on the proposed budget, overall the budget is for salary and wages about 41.3%, programs and grants 31.3%, marketing 13.3%, and admin ops 14.1%. One thing we do always when we're working through the budget is we look at our corporate revenue trends. As you can see, we have recovered from COVID, where we had some decreases with our tribal gaming revenues in FY 21. Those have really stabilized. We're about at 68, 66, mid-60s million in those revenues over the last few years. Fees and investments, we have seen some increases in those in recent years, or we did last year due to the interest rates that have been high. Though those will be coming down now, so that's why we've adjusted that revenue target going into 25. State and funding reimbursements, those are related to where we can charge back to state funding for our corporate employees. So that would be like whenever we're working through state programs that allow us to charge admin, as well as some one-time federal dollars and federal grant funding. Interlocal and other revenues, that was new starting in FY 2023, where we took defederalized state small business credit initiative funding and transferred it to the corporation. So that's why you see a big influx in that FY 2023 year. We are still getting returns on those revenues through as collateral participation deals start to come back, the returns come back to us as those are no longer needed. So, but we do project those revenues will decrease as we're not doing any more. We're not doing any new deals out of this defederalized funding. So as the returns come back, we do just anticipate them decreasing. So for FY 2025 overall, we're estimating 84 million in revenues. Revenue and spending, we also always look at, making sure that we keep some funding available for unanticipated either spending or something with our revenues comes through unanticipated so that we can adjust the budget if needed. So we do always look at that and keep in mind that we want to keep some flexibility there with leaving some fund balance and also, for the ability to keep on using prior year funds in future budget cycles. Next slide shows budget by focus area, and this includes the strategic outreach and attraction reserve fund, just to give a picture of the total overall funding that that comes in that are utilized by the MEDC. As you can see, the draft total budget is about $1 billion. SOAR makes up the biggest chunk. It makes up the biggest chunk of that, 500 million. And then of that piece, the draft corporate budget is 92.5 million. So you can see it looks very skewed because of SOAR right now. 55.9% is for attract, retain, and grow business. That's where we put SOAR, though really, SOAR does have an impact to many strategic focus areas. It's just that we picked the primary one when we're looking at this. But there is downstream impacts for other strategic focus areas. Next, to develop, attract, and place about 11.7, marketing the state 5.3%, accelerate high tech growth 10.6, and you can see so on for the other items. And I just would like to note, support and grow our talent. Even though that looks like a small percentage, really MEDC is a one of many state agencies that are involved with the workforce development. Leo receives much more funding and they do workforce programs as well, but we do some here and support through in various avenues. The next slide, I just wanted to show, what the budget by focus area is when you're not including SOAR, that, people can, so everyone can see, it is much more evenly distributed, that, SOAR does kind of skew that, but it is much more evenly distributed amongst the different strategic focus areas, when pulling out SOAR. The corporate budget breakdown. So this shows you just kind of the percentage of how much of the corporate budget, is compared to the state budget, overall budget. State funds are 91.2% of the budget. And corporate is 8.8%. For really, most of our programmatic dollars come from the state with SOAR, business tricks, community revitalization, entrepreneurship. We received talent funding. So there's a variety of state programming, Pure Michigan, that mainly comes through with the state funding. Corporate funds still used for some programmatic spending as indicated in previous slides. So we do use quite a bit of our corporate budget for salaries and administration to help support those program areas. The next slide is just, and I won't go too much in detail on this, but I just wanted to provide this as a reminder because this was discussed more in the July meeting. But for our FY 2025 state budget, I just wanted to provide, as a reminder of the different programs that we do receive state funding for. Then the next slide. So highlights from the proposed corporate budget. Revenues, 65.9 million tribal gaming revenues with 40.6 million from casinos and 25.3 million from online gaming. 10.3 million of state funding to the corporation to cover staffing costs. 4 million in defederalized SSPCI 1.0 funds related to returns of deals, and we'll be using 8.5 million in carry forward funds, where of that 8.5, 1.18 million is unused previously approved talent programming. Leo had some funding that they could use instead of us using ours, so we decided to reuse it this year for talent programming. Staffing total budget for corporate FTEs of 236, which was an increase of 1 FTE compared to FY 24. 1.9 million in projected increase, mainly related to cost of living increases and insurance increases for our corporate employees. Program eliminations and base reductions. I will say for this, we did, discuss all these proposed reductions with our teams to ensure that, their programs would be able to run effectively, that there would be no harm. But, just looking over at the overall funding, we did decide to do some reductions, and there are also, in some cases, state funds available instead, and we did not need to use corporate funds. Research, we reduced by 250,000 due to the elimination of a contingency funding. We do have other contingency funding lines and one I'll mention a little bit further down. So we decided to just keep our contingency funding in one spot. Community technical assistance programs, we did reduce that slightly by 250,000. So it went from 3 million to 2.75 million. Marketing, we eliminated the 1 million NFL draft sponsorship since it was no longer needed. We had 2 years that we provided some funding for that, but now that the draft occurred in a very successful fashion, it is no longer needed. There was a reduction of 1.35 million from 8.35 million to 7 million for business marketing. I would like to point out that the state does have dedicated funds for business marketing as well. It's about 5.8 million. So that is still being utilized for business marketing, and a reduction of 600,000 in sponsorships from 2.3 million to 1.7. Really that, we'll be making sure that we're looking at our sponsorships, that they are really focused on our strategic priorities. So this gives us that ability to do that. Growth office, there was 1.5 million, in FY 24's budget, but they did receive 5 million in dedicated state funding, so we eliminated that out of the corporate budget this year. In talent programming was a reduction of 5.8 million, and they also will be receiving 10 million in dedicated state funding for their programs such as talent action team, internships, and other such programming. Funding shifts between corporate and state. We did do a few funding shifts. IT services and legal costs, we moved those from state general fund to corporate funds. The main reason for that, is we are utilizing our general fund as much as we can for state employees payroll, as the state will factor that in as a part of the state budget to provide economics for anything related to state payroll. So we wanted to leverage to make sure we're getting economics as much as we can for cost of living adjustments or insurance adjustments with state employees versus using where we have some other funds that we can use that administration for on the state side, but they are capped, so we don't get those economics. So we really looked at that and then utilizing more of those admin dollars for corporate employees where it made sense. We also shifted 2 million in contractual small business services from the state business attraction community revitalization funding to corporate funds. And I'll have one more slide where I'll discuss that a little bit further on the need for why we decided to do that, shift. There is still some state funds that are dedicated for that we will be utilizing for small business services. It's not just 2 million for small business services. There is about another 20 million or so that we're using for small business services. Lastly, new programs and baseline increases. 1 million, we decided to increase our strategic priorities contingency funding by 1 million to a total of 2. With the elections, upcoming elections, there could be some shifts in priorities depending on what occurs. So we wanted to make sure that we had flexibility to be able to shift some funds around more easily and to use funding if priorities are changed via the election process. So the next slide, state. So this is just to illustrate with the state business attraction community revitalization funding on why we did shift some programs from this funding back to corporate funds. We did see an increase related to carry forward funds over from 21 to 22 into 23. A lot of that, I think, really had to do with, there was some slowdown with business deals when COVID occurred, and then we started seeing them pick up, which is why now we're seeing, a decrease with our carry forward funds. And as it decreased at a peak of 23, it's been decreasing 24, and we also have a projected decrease again in 2025. So, and we also utilize these funds for some initial piloting of programs and stuff, so we could show the value of them to get dedicated state funding, which we got some for talent this year. So, so really with this funding, the carry forward funding going down, we had to look at where we could shift, where it made sense to shift some funding back to corporate. And in order for us to really make sure that we're utilizing this funding for our two of our flagship programs, the business development program and the community revitalization program, due to the high demand in those programs. That is the full presentation from me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Jill? Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Quinton, anything else under the CEO budget presentation?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe the action items are coming up subsequently under that farm song.
Finance. Yep. Great. So, Ms. Ardisana, do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Quinton.
Yeah, I was saying nothing further.
Great. Beth, do you have any updates or comments on the FY 2025 budget on behalf of the Finance Committee?
No, I would just say on behalf of the overall Finance Committee, which represents 4 of us on the call today, is that we've had an opportunity, as the whole board is, to review this as on an ongoing process. We've reviewed it in our last Finance Committee. You know, our goal is to make sure that it ties to the areas that we intend to focus on. We think it does that, and that it represents, you know, the right level of income we expect to get, and we think it does that. And I think Jill's done a great job of presenting the whole thing, and it is recommended by the Finance Committee for approval. So at this point, I think we're at the approval stage.
Thank you, Beth. Is there a motion and support to approve the resolution adopting the FY 2025 corporate budget?
Well,
I believe we have a question.
Yes. Are there any questions?
Question?
So I think Dr. Ono has his hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to support the motion.
Okay,
That's
great.
all. And also to thank Jill and the Finance Committee for their tremendous work.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ono. So I heard a motion from Dr. Ono. Was there a support in the room? Great. So we have a motion by Dr. Ono and support from Bobby Hopewell. Any additional questions or comments prior to the vote? Hearing none, Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Ms. Artizana,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Cabina,
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Ms. Hammoud,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Ono,
Yes.
Mr. Sutherland,
Yes.
Ms. Thorson,
Yes.
and Ms. Tomina.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. I see that Krista Flynn is not available today, so Mike McLaughlin, will you provide updates on behalf of the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as you indicated, Krista's traveling back from overseas and is unable to join us and asked me if I would fill in today, so I will do my best. Additionally, we welcome Mayor Rosalind Bliss to the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee. She joined us at our September 17 meeting to formulate consensus recommendations for cost of living and changes to the employee performance scorecard process. You'll see additional details in the PowerPoint that Lynn will be delivering shortly, and we will be requesting action on these items. While the benefit renewals were received, the need for further consideration will move action on this item to the November Executive Committee meeting. A preview will be provided today by Lynn. And finally, with the approval of the corporate budget today, the variable pay recommendation will be considered at the November Executive Committee meeting as well to ensure year-end scorecard data is finalized. Unless there are any questions, I'll turn it over to Lynn and ask her to walk us through the PowerPoint.
Mr. McLaughlin. We're going to start and speak a little bit. Some of this will be more detailed typically than we would go into. I know we have a lot of new board members, and I want to make sure that the process is understood as well as the process over the course of the next 2 months as it relates to benefit renewals for our corporate employees. Just an overview of our current state. MEDC continues to offer what our broker would consider a gold level PPO option through the Blue Cross and Blue Shield program. We have recently, as recently as last year, introduced a small deductible program to offset some of the increases received in 2023. We were originally a no deductible. We now went to a $250 individual 500 in 23. That was a little bit of a learning curve for our team, but they have now been utilizing that program for about a year. Unfortunately, healthcare renewals continue to trend well into the double digits across the board. Based on information that we're receiving, anywhere between 15 and 30% this year is not unusual across the state. We have always had a opportunity really to ride the experience rating that we've received over the last 10 plus years. We had low claim volume, we had low claim costs, and based on our demographic data, we were always blessed really with having a small experience rating that drove those premium increases over the years. Unfortunately, we hit a snag in this past year. We experienced not just high claim volumes, high cost claims in 2024, with the cost per contract of almost 30%. Of that, pharmacy drove about 71% of that increase. And a total of 33% of our claim spend was in pharmacy. That is not unusual. That is what most organizations are realizing right now. Unfortunately, it hit us in 2024. Our growth in employee population since 22 has also contributed to these increases. Our subscribers are up about 20% and about 60% growth in all members across all programs at MEDC. So the cost increase impacts for 24. The Blue PPO is going to realize an 18.6% increase over last year. While the Blue Cross HMO, the Blue Care Network HMO plan, will see about a 4.6% increase. It is by far our lowest subscriber plan, with only roughly 28 people subscribed with Blue Care Network. So the majority of our employees are subscribed to Blue PPO. So that 18.6% increase is fairly dramatic for that population. Delta dental renewals have not been received at this point, but we're anticipating an increase of somewhere between 3 and 5. That is a low cost program. So the impact of that will not be significant, but any increase is something that needs to be considered in overall benefit renewals. We will not have any changes to our disability and life plans. We have negotiated rate locks for those. So there will be no increases in calendar year 25 on those programs. And we are in the process of negotiating a 2-year rate lock for our vision program as well. So we have requested of our broker to really explore plan adjustments. We need to be able to determine how we mitigate on an almost 20% increase. That will result in us moving our approval for benefit renewals to the November meeting. This is the same process we utilized last year. It is not ideal, but it appears that if we are trying to both share that cost increase, but also potentially make benefit plan changes, it will need a little bit more research, a little bit more opportunity to walk through what is really the best choice for our corporate employees. We've been tremendously fortunate to be able to attract and retain a great employee population based on our overarching benefits packages throughout the years. We want to continue to be able to do that without kind of breaking the bank, so to speak. So we are looking at increases in our deductible program as an option with a slightly increased premium share. We had recognized that we would likely receive a double-digit increase this year and had budgeted about 15% for that. And we are obviously open to that at this point in time. So whatever open enrollment occurs over the course of the next 30 days or so, which will need to occur in order for us to get the data into the system for a 1/1 effective date, will be contingent on this board's approval in November.
Has there been consideration of moving to high deductible plan with an HSA and most of corporate America has gone there. A lot of nonprofits have gone there because it is a much more, a no deductible or very limited deductible and very unusual.
Yes, absolutely agree. And that is one of the options we're considering, is moving to a plan that will institute a health savings account to offset the out-of-pocket costs associated with the high program. We are absolutely considering that this year as well.
Take some education.
Absolutely, yes. And we started doing some of that education last year, that at some point in time, we would likely be moving to that type of a program. So it should not be fully a new introductory period for that, but how to navigate that program will take some education. But great one, thank you.
Then can you restate the question for those online?
My apologies. Yes, the question from Dr. McMahon was if we had considered a high deductible program with a HSA or health savings account option. So my response was based on that we are considering that as part of the alternatives for fiscal 25. I'm sorry, calendar 25, which is also our fiscal. Other questions on that? So essentially, for November action, we will be looking at providing a recommendation back to this group for full approval for the calendar 25 year of corporate benefits for our corporate employees only. We will be bringing that back in November for full consideration. If there is any education to employees in the interim, it will be after personnel and compensation have had an opportunity to review those, and they will be contingent on full board approval. Okay. Moving on, it is September, so this is the time of year that we do our budget renewal as well as look at our cost of living for our corporate employees. In fiscal 24, we discussed the variables, fiscal 24, we discussed the variables that go into determining cost of living. Previously, we had looked exclusively at the CPI or the Consumer Price Index as what kind of drove the approvals on cost of living. Last year, we instituted an opportunity to look at not only CPI, but budgeted dollars associated with that to ensure that we were both making sure we were fiscally responsible, still managing to the Midwest CPI, but taking those as different variables in our consideration for cost of living. The current CPI is at 2.9%, just slightly over that. We will have the final CPI on 10/13, but we anticipate it will stay fairly consistent. We are always looking to ensure that we are recognizing we have both corporate and civil service employees. Our civil service staff are on schedule to receive 5% in 2024, based on 2024. And our budget for this year was 3.5%. So given all of those variables, our personnel and compensation subcommittee discussed the options available to us, and the recommendation they have made is to do a payout to budget at 3.5%, which gets us a little closer to the state side, but is also ensuring that we are being budgetarily conscious. PNC would request action on the cost of living increase recommendation.
Great. Sorry, any questions for Lynn? Hearing none. Do we have a motion for approval of the FY25 COLA increase?
This
COLA
is Beth.
adjustment?
This is Beth. I will move approval.
Great, thank you, Beth. Any support?
Yeah, Mr. Lutz with a second.
Yes.
Great. Hearing motion by Beth Ardisana and second from Tom Lutz. Are there any additional discussion necessary before the motion? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you. Ms. Ardisana,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss,
Yes.
Mr. Kabina,
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Ms. Hamud,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Step out of the room.
Oh, okay. Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Ono,
Yes.
Mr. Sutherland, Did we lose Mr. Sutherland?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Thank you. Ms. Thorson,
Yes.
Ms. Tomina,
Yes.
the motion passes.
Great, thank you. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you. The next, as Mr. McLaughlin had mentioned, is a preview for November. We are, with the approval of our budget for fiscal 25, variable pay is actually paid in the new fiscal year. So that was part of our budget presentation today approved by this board. We had originally had discussions throughout the year that there was a desire to return to an 8% variable pay bank that we had had previously. For those that are new to our board, we previously had an 8% variable pay based on performance at 3 different factors for our corporate employees. In 2019, we had reduced that to 6.5% to manage through and mitigate some of the allocations that we had received during that time period that continued somewhat through the COVID outbreak. As a result, it had been the desire of the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee, as well as members of the board in general, to return at some point in time to, now that we had a more stabilized financial picture for not only the current year, but the future years. We had talked about that during the course of the year. We had a follow-up conversation looking at financials for end of year as well as our fiscal 25 budget. And there's a desire to take, I'll call it a baby step, to get us back into the larger variable pay option. So in lieu of having an increase in our overall personnel costs, as well as administrative funding shifting to our corporate dollars, the baby step that we would like to express and take would be to move to a 7% variable pay for 25. Given the trajectory that we would be to get to a larger variable pay as soon as we have completed our compensation study for fiscal year 25. So this will again not be a vote for today, but rather it's a preview as to what to anticipate in November based on the recommendation of our Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee. You will see in the resolution today that we are opening the compensation policy already. So there will be an opportunity to just adjust for that going into November. And then we will actually take the vote in November to approve it based on the final organizational goals at the end of fiscal year 24. Any questions that I can answer on the variable pay preview?
Any questions for Lynn? Lynn, you explained everything so clearly. I don't hear any questions.
Okay, we'll keep rolling. Next, we're going to talk a bit about our change management project and a little bit more about performance as it relates to our corporate employees. So piggybacking on Quentin's earlier reference to the governor's Make It in Michigan philosophy, we have attempted not only as an organization from an external standpoint, but as well as an internal standpoint to operationalize those 3 pillars: projects, places, and people. As we look internally as an organization to do that, we aligned our strategies from an internal employee standpoint to those pillars as well. So that looks something like this. We want to be able to optimize our operations to be able to truly drive organizational strategy. How we define that into those categories are as follows. You have performance management process and philosophy, which we'll talk about a little bit more today, which will incorporate a tiered 360-degree review process. We have our balanced scorecard and ensuring those goals are aligned and provide line of sight for all employees within the organization. And then we have the compensation, job analysis, pay structure, and market benchmarking that we traditionally have done as an organization. But with a twist, we're going to do a full organizational evaluation on compensation. It's been roughly 10, 11 years since we performed that. We want to ensure that we are not only doing all the right things by our employees, by our organization, but impacting our ability as a organization to have cultural values that are aligned with our compensation and performance philosophy, as well as being good fiduciaries of those dollars that we expend for personnel related costs. So first being balanced scorecard. The purpose is really to develop a scorecard that has all functional goals, understanding how they have a direct line of sight to the organizational goals. We want to ensure that we're determining outcomes and measuring things that specifically define our operational success. And then we want to align our scorecard with the Make It Mission philosophy that we spoke about a moment ago. And the economic development framework focused on those three pillars: people, places, and projects. The outcomes should be a strategy-based and it's balanced scorecard for all employees, an action plan for execution, our strategic and operational outcomes and performance measures that are consistently applied and are incentivizing the appropriate behaviors, and a best practice guide regarding consistent alignment from our organizational goals all the way down to each individual in the organization. Next, we're talking specifically about employee performance management. We want to be able to redesign our performance management process to ensure that we have accountability at all levels of the organization. Not just the what we do, but the how we do things matters equally to those metrics that are aligned from an objective standpoint. We want to, again, set the behaviors that are key to our organizational success, and then provide equitable employee performance metrics across the organization that are inclusive and fair for all employees. The outcomes for that process will be a more agile system that encourages two-way feedback. We want more touch points and touch bases between employees and people leaders. A line of sight for employees that they understand how they fit with those organizational goals and how they impact those organizational goals. A process that reinforces our cultural values overall, and streamlined year-end performance reviews that are meaningful and that are feed into our cultural values and our overall organizational strategy. So for those especially that are new to our board, what we currently provide is a blend of 4 organizational goals for all MEDC staff, 2 divisional goals, and then 2 individual goals is how we assess performance for our corporate employees. That's reviewed on an annual basis. And then the variable pay we spoke about a moment ago is based on performance in those 3 categories. In fiscal 2025, we are recommending a transition, one that allows us to select 2 organizational goals that specifically speak to an employee's line of sight from their current role, 3 individual goals, one of which is a team-based goal that shows a unified success within the team as well as for that individual. And then finally, a competency, how we do things based weight that not only defines how we as an organization are doing, how they as a team and individual are doing, but how we are performing as an organization and as an individual employee, and drawing that up through the process. We want to formalize quarterly check-ins for all employees with their people leader so that they understand where they're performing during the course of the year to goal, or where they're not performing during the course of the year to goal, and how we facilitate those conversations. We will keep the year-end review, and then there will be a tiered implementation of a 360-degree review process. It will start with our executive team. You'll see in 2026, it will move down to all people leaders. And then the reward will again be variable pay. We are in the process of doing a compensation review. So that will be for 25, that will be determined based on this board going into our end of fiscal year for payout in 26. 26 is a continuation of that. with a TBD on the reward component of that for an outcome that's determined by that process we're going through with the third party to assess our existing compensation policies and determine if they are still effective. And then finally, compensation that I've mentioned a number of times. We would like to refresh MEDC's current compensation philosophy, which is overseen by this board. We want to update our current policies and structures to be reflective of our current organizational needs. We want to promote internal pay equity and inclusion, ensure external market competitiveness, and of course, develop clear pathways to retain our top talent. So the desired outcomes will be an updated position description that includes a skills analysis for all roles, a structured framework that defines and organizes all roles within the organization and provides a hierarchy and how those relationships and job families move through the entire organization, and then an overall strategy for implementation. So the timeline you'll see is all of the heavy lifting that will be done from our internal teams. Natalie Chimico is leading our cultural values implementation. Aileen Bovan is leading our performance management process. Aileen will also be leading compensation with Natalie overseeing our balanced scorecard. So what we're requesting of this group today is to take action on our employee performance redesign as we provided the overview today. PNC reviewed and discussed the recommendations, the alignment to the people, projects, and places pillars, and ensure that we're meeting the deliverables from an outcome-based standpoint that were defined by the overall project. So this would be to move to the new structure of competencies, individual and organizational goals. It would be quarterly and annual review processes, and then a performance-based variable pay opportunity for fiscal year 25. And the PNC subcommittee would request the board's approval for this action.
Mike, do you have anything to add from the subcommittee?
No, other than really like to thank Lynn and her team for the hard work on this. We think it's very thoughtful and request approval.
Great. So at this time, I'd like to see if there's a motion and support to approve the performance management and compensation plan resolution that was in the board packet.
This is Mayor Neely. I move that.
Great. Any second? Can you say that again? I couldn't hear in the room.
It was Mayor Bliss, she support.
Great.
Support.
No, thank you very much. We have a motion from Mayor Neely and support from Mayor Bliss. Any other discussion before the roll call vote? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you. Ms. Artizana,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss,
Yes.
Mr. Cabina,
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez,
Yes.
Ms. Hamud,
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Ono.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sutherland,
Yes.
Ms. Thorson,
Yes.
and Ms. Tomina. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing that. Thank you. That motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Lynn, for all of your work, as well as Mike, Krista, and the rest of the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee. With that, we will turn to Tom Lutz. Mr. Lutz, do you have an Audit and Governance Subcommittee report?
I do, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal. Only when I thought I needed that. The fiscal 2024 financial audits for the Michigan Strategic Fund and the MEDC have begun. We anticipate they'll run through January of 2025, with the OAG releasing their opinion on the financial statements by the 8th of January. We anticipate that the audit reports will be published either February or March of 2025. OAG continues to work on the report for the Michigan Community Revitalization Program performance audits. And we think that that will be issued in sometime in October, at which time the subcommittee will hold a meeting to address the report as it relates to address the issued report, and as well as any other performance audits at that time. So that's our update.
Great. Any questions for Tom Lutz? Great. I think Dr. Pink is not able to make it today, but I would ask Steve to provide a brief update on behalf of the Strategic Planning Subcommittee.
Wait for the mic.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I'll provide a quick update here on behalf of Dr. Pink. We did meet as the Strategic Planning Subcommittee on September 3rd. All members were present, Dr. Pink, Mayor Hopewell, Dr. Ono, and Mrs. Lieberman and Tommy Tavron. We reviewed actually the proposed budget that was presented today, as well as the draft fiscal year 25 focus area targets for feedback. There was a lot of good questions and feedback provided that we'll likely have an additional meeting before we present those at our next executive committee meeting for consideration and potential adoption. We also were joined by Ben Marchiona, who I many of you met here at the last executive committee meeting, the Chief Innovation Ecosystem Officer. He provided a little bit more details in terms of his priorities for coming up fiscal year the entrepreneurship and innovation space. A lot of great feedback that was provided there. But Mayor Hopewell, Dr. Ono, feel free to jump in and add anything else from your.
So I have one thing. So is there a global microphone or is this the only? So we all sharing is spirit. Okay. Interesting. Sharing is also COVID, but go ahead. My only thing that's connective to the previous report on the personnel and compensation, and maybe I should have raised it then, but it's truly this linking these objectives to the work of those individuals. The other thing, and certainly could be looking at this wrong, it feels like there's a lot of outputs compared to outcomes in the performance measures. And, what are our targets? And we've talked, Steve knows I always talk about our intentions. And if we have aspirations to do this, that, or what have you, and we're just reporting out what we did, compared to reporting out that we intended to do this and this is where we are related to that. So I think we need to make sure, and I think we should have a discussion or get some type of connectivity to how are we ensuring outcomes as relates to the strategic plan, as relates to expected performance and the measures of that performance. So in my comments.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Hopewell. Dr. Ono?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to say that I'm really very, very happy and pleased to be asked to be on this committee and looking forward to working hard on behalf of the state of Michigan. I also wanted to say that, as you know, I'm the current chair of the University Research Corridor, which is Michigan State, and Wayne State University. We have our own strategic planning process, and I wanted to report that we believe that one of the responsibilities of the research universities is to be an economic spark plug, and that alignment with MEDC is critical. And so I just want to let you know that I spoke with the CEO of URC today, and she and I we wanted to report to MEDC that we would take our responsibility very seriously, and that as we move forward with MEDC's strategic plan, that the university will use it as a guide so that we can be a positive force for the state's economic development. So I just wanted to add that for the minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Ono. And as we've discussed in this meeting many times, the universities are a key partner in making sure that not only is MEDC successful, but the entire state of Michigan. And the visibility and education that the universities provide is critical to the state and to its residents. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And this is Mayor Bliss, and I just have a comment, a follow-up to what Mayor Hobelt said. I appreciate all of the MEDC staff that have spent time with me, helping me learn about all the great work that you're doing and provide me with some of the additional information on metrics. And I just piggyback on what Mayor Hobelt said. As I took a look at all of the goals, one thing that struck me as well, and maybe the state has collected, just not shared in the report, in addition to what is our goal, how close are we to reaching that? In addition to sharing how many, let's say, new business starts, I'm curious, how many closures were there? How many businesses were retained? Did they grow? Again, as we look at attraction, I think we always have to keep our eye on retention as well, and growth and thriving. If 3 started and 10 closed, in my opinion, we're not doing our jobs very well. And so, as we look at metrics and tying those together with performance, and then our overarching goals as an organization, I think always looking at some of those retention and growth numbers as well.
Thank you, Mayor Bliss.
The room next door, we've discovered, so when they must put the wings there, they interview with the wings.
They're not supposed to have.
It's fine.
Great. All right, any other comments? Questions? If not, we will turn to the CEO report with Quentin Messer Jr.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of macro comments before I'll get into a few short slides. First of all, just a note of thanks to the board members who were executive committee members who are volunteers. Also, for those in the room, there was a little mood lighting just to set the mood this meeting. Soon we'll be having music for some of the new members. I'm joking. But want to just maybe set a context before I talk about legislative updates, but just overall, I like to try to provide overall trends and things we see. One, I think we have a number of elected officials, we have presidents of universities, we have other senior leaders. We're seeing greater scrutiny of economic development. And why do I begin there? Because we've had colleagues, many of whom have been here 10 plus years, who've really seen the nature of their activities come under greater scrutiny, not just in unintended ways. And I think some of the work that Lynn and her team have done is very important for retention. There are people who simply want to come and do honest, integrous work on behalf of their friends and neighbors, but don't want their names in the paper. They don't want, to be subjected to some of the things that have been subjected later. I think in this role, I expect that, try to shield as much, but that is something, and I want to flag that because I think all of you as MEDC Executive Committee members should be aware and that you have day jobs. Please, if you receive media or other inquiries about the MEDC, please direct them to me. I'll make sure that you have my information. It's messerq@michigan.org, messerq@michigan.org. And my phone number is 517-881-5861, 517-881-5861. And the reason I provide that is to make sure that we respect the fact that this is a volunteer, you're answering a call to service. We don't want to provide more homework, but that's sort of the context in which we're dealing with. The second thing I just want to flag, macro trend, is the politicization of economic development, which is something that a lot of our colleagues did not anticipate. A lot of people purposely went into economic development rather than going and work for chambers of commerce or trade organizations because they wanted to do the work of growing communities without politics. Well, lo and behold, things change. And, we don't go into the factors of that, But I do want to just flag that, and it does have a bearing on how the stressors of staff and things of that nature. So I just do want to flag that we will be in a election cycle, national cycle, obviously, over the next 40 days, but we will begin immediately going into an election cycle for our next governor's race in November of 2026, and that will begin probably November 6th. So I think that we internally are sort of working to make sure that we focus on the Making in Michigan Economic Development Strategy, which was announced by Governor Whitmer and bipartisan members of the state legislature, but it's not her vision. It's a unified state vision for allowing us to do what we do best. We do deep tech and hard tech well. There's no other place, I would argue, on planet Earth, but certainly in North America, that does deep tech, hard tech well. And as a consequence, we need to make sure that our strategy aligns with federal industrial policy, independent of maybe our individual views of that policy, but that's where our taxpayer dollars are going. And so we're committed to having abundant and disproportionate success in bringing back our tax dollars back to Michigan. That's why you see the focus on the Making in Michigan strategy, focus on people, places, and projects, with particular focus, not exclusive, but particular focus on automobility, semiconductors, clean tech, and defense and aerospace, because you see, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, or the various programs in Departments of Commerce, Energy, and Defense, that's where our tax dollars are going to be dispersed to one of 50 states. We feel that it should be disproportionately coming to Michigan. The other thing, two other quick factors I want to flag are there are more broad definitions of economic development. And with those broader definitions of economic development, there are greater expansions of the expectations of where MEDC as an organization and where MEDC staff should present him or themselves. We can see, I've been asked to opine on things that I would argue far afield, whether it's K-12 education or higher education, for which I don't have necessarily the expertise. But I think that's, I flag that because we see the centrality of economic growth, economic opportunity as being important. We have a number of elected officials. They will tell you there's no appetite for anybody to pay more taxes, but there's an appetite for more services, more infrastructure, more everything. We see the same thing in higher education. So how do you solve that? You solve it by making sure that there are more people paying in. And we certainly see that in the utility sector. As they sort of build out an infrastructure without passing on the cost of residential, we need to have more industrial use. So I just flag that. And then finally, the hybrid nature of work changes the way in which we develop people, the way that we socialize work, the incidental collisions that lead to collaboration, we have to be much more intentional about. So I just want to flag those factors. And then maybe the last thing I want to do before I'll go to what I was supposed to do, because I'm getting Amy's disapproval eye in the room, for those of you in the room, is I want to remind, especially our new members, because now that it's public and you can talk to some of our older members of the executive committee, you're going to be asked by everybody about, hey, can MEDC support this? Can MEDC support that? Sure, they can write a check for this, they can write a check for that. I want to make sure, and we can talk further, but MEDC recommends for state support for programs, and whether you see a grant that's for community revitalization or business attraction, MEDC only recommends, the Michigan Strategic Fund Board approves. I think that's an important and healthy distinction. And as I have learned, the Michigan Strategic Fund Board doesn't always approve everything we recommend. We typically like to bat 100%, but it's not 100%. So I think that's an important distinction as you increasingly may feel pressured. Feel free to always refer those calls to me. We always present to people the what must be truths to receive support, but it is MEDC recommended, Michigan Strategic Fund Board approved, and that is an independent public body in which currently the only overlap really between MEDC and the MSF is I, because of by virtue of my role, am the president and chair of the Michigan Strategic Fund, but only have one vote and do not shape the agenda. We'll now do as Amy has previously directed. Legislative update. There is a toolkit. Some of you in the room have a sheet that tries to lay out what we've accomplished with this Make It in Michigan strategy focus on people, places, and project. On the back side of that sheet, you can see the Make It in Michigan toolbox. What I think the crucial elements of this really are three. Number one, for all our success, and I'm not saying that we're perfect, I'm not saying that we've gotten it right, and we're always working to get better every day, but collectively, Team Michigan has accomplished a lot. But Team Michigan has remarkably few economic development tools relative to any city. Forget its peers. I mean, I moved up from Louisiana, which a lot of people would not sort of hold out as a bastion of economic development prowess. But Louisiana had more economic development tools than Michigan, certainly more than our peer states. So one of the things in a bipartisan way, Governor Whitmer has led with Speaker Tate and SML brings, and also help from Republicans, is how do we make sure that if we execute this Make It in Michigan economic development strategy, we have tools that help companies of all sizes first. Not only companies, but also the men and women of the state that they employ, but also we can do things that help businesses whose growth is not anticipated to be linear. So with that, you can see the bringing back the R&D tax credit, the state that put the world on wheels, invented the snowboard, and other inventions. Not to have an R&D tax credit, I would argue, is criminal. State site strategic site readiness program. We have 2 senior executives from our 2 publicly traded utility. We have elected officials across the state. They will tell you, to a man, to a woman, that you've got to have sites ready because you never know who's looking for you. Looking at you, it's just like anything else. Per field matters, and it matters in economic development. So that's why they're in the program. Housing and placemaking. There will be an increase in justifiable focus on housing. While MISHDA is a predominant agency, we do, through our places team led by Michelle Wallman, do mixed-use placemaking, and we have tremendous projects that the Michigan Strategic Fund Board has approved. MEDC staff has worked tirelessly to get to that point of approval, and I would argue over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a remarkable change in landscape on both peninsulas, east and west sides of the state. Transformational brownfield expansion. Simply, we have a lot of brownfields we want to bring back into commerce. We have passed modernizing RIN zones. Higher Michigan, this was formerly Good Jobs in Michigan. There is such an emphasis, as you can imagine, on having more and more high wage jobs come to Michigan. But we have currently, as it stands, only 2 tools to do that. That's the Michigan Business Development Program grant that is capped at $10 million and SOAR. So if you have only 2 hammers, one big and one small, everything looks like a nail. We all know, especially Tom, everything isn't a nail. And so we need to have the sophistication in order to have tools that are that can respond to the different type of opportunities. And so we're working on that. Transit and transportation. We obviously know that people of a different generation, I'm of a generation where as soon as I could get my permit, I wanted to drive and never turn back. But it took my son, who's 20, our son, he was the last of his group to drive. He just didn't want to, because I guess he had parental Uber drivers. But the point is that we have to factor in young people want to be in areas in which they have transportation options, and those who are young at heart. And I think that's why you see some of the development strategies that are happening in our cities across both peninsulas. The Make It in Michigan Closing Fund is the new name for what was formerly known as SOAR. Those are those large transformational projects. We, for generations, have talked about diversification of our industry. We are more than automotive, but automotive remains, mobility remains a dominant industry in our state. But we want to make sure that we have other industries, whether it's aerospace and defense, semiconductors, life sciences, fintech, insurance tech. And so we want to make sure that we have those dollars to compete with the US and Mexican states and Canadian provinces in North America for these transformational opportunities. And then Innovation Fund, I think Steve mentioned Ben Marciona, who's the state's first chief innovation ecosystem officer. We know that if we're going to be successful, we have to make sure that we continue to have an environment that favors and rewards risk-taking entrepreneurs, whether those entrepreneurs are creating businesses, seeking public market exit or strategic exit, or those who are creating businesses to transfer to future generations, or those who are creating lifestyle businesses. We are working along with Amy Rencher, many of you know, our VP of Small Business Services, to make sure that happens. That there is an innovation fund that we want to make sure is funded year over year, because we know that it has to be a healthy mix of businesses, and we always have to make sure that the new is coming into our economic ecosystem. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about some of the executive branch reorganization. While we are a quasi-public-private entity of E3, we're still part of state government. I have the fortune of being part of Governor Whitmer's, an honor of being part of Governor Whitmer's cabinet. And so wanted to walk through some things. For some of you, this is things you already know because of your day jobs, but for example, when the state announced the Make It in Michigan Economic Development Strategy, Governor Whitmer also announced the nation's first chief growth officer, Hillary Joe. Many of you know Hillary is our chief marketing officer. So that work of the growth office that had previously been at LEO, the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, is now at MEDC, and this will be beginning, I think, October 1, which is, for those who may not know, apologies for assuming, but our fiscal year is October 1, September 30th. So we will now, next week, be entering FY 2025. Related to that, the work of the Growing Michigan Together Council, which Hillary led as the Chief State Growth Officer, has that council no longer exists, but the work has now been owned and integrated into the work of a number of agencies led by MEDC, LEO, and the executive office to make sure that those recommendations continue to move forward in partnership with the state legislature and other stakeholders. Third, some of you know that the Michigan Arts and Cultural Council sits in MEDC. One of the things that we did in our reorg in February of this year, we had a number of our offices, this office, as well as our state historic preservation office, report to Amy Evans, our chief of staff and governor's office. We want to make sure that every office that has a appointed board has the type of senior level visibility and elevation. And I think it's been a success. There was a similar cleanup with the State Historic Preservation Office of SHPO. So we have greater, and we're seeing and anticipate even more communications and integration into the overall culture and team here at MEDC. And then related to both the Michigan Arts and Culture Council and SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, all the budgeting, procurement, and related functions will still be performed under the direction of the Michigan Strategic Fund. And that is, I assume, by state statute. So by state statute. Next slide. Wanted to follow up on discussion from when we were together in July in Midland. Want to clarify definitions of diversity related to our small business work. You have them on the screen. Aileen, I don't know whether you want to comment. Aileen Rovan is our full-time DEI officer. I want to say that we view DEI as an imperative. I'm not going to get into moral because different people have different moral, but it just makes financial sense. And the one thing I say to people all the time, the dominant color in most societies is green. And we believe, and we know that there's powerful evidence that a diversity of thought, opinion, neurological ability helps for a richer and more creative environment. So, Aileen, do you want to comment on this slide since you were the person that put it together? Or helped put it together? Or did you want to say anything in general?
Sure. So I was not with all of you in July, but from my understanding, there were some questions on kind of our scorecard and how we count assistance to diverse businesses. And so this just kind of puts all that in one place. So for that metric that's on our scorecard, it is at like 63%. And that is really indicative of a few programs that we have, really mostly in the small business space. So our international trade programs, our Peer Mission Business Connect, SBDC, and then our State Small Business Credit Initiative. And those are really the bulk of where we're tracking that diverse business existence. And then kind of just speaking more on the definitions themselves, the federal definition is of SETI, which is socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. And this really kind of came from the State Small Business Credit Initiative that was relaunched in 22. I think all the years are kind of holding together for me at this point. But that was Treasury's attempt at kind of creating some framework and definition around minority and minimum businesses that states like Michigan that have some constitutional constraints can kind of get behind and use that for program guidelines. So this really is has all of the racial indicators there, as well as disability, limited English proficiency, veteran status, etc. So I do think that as an organization, we will be kind of changing how we look at this, especially as we go towards a new balanced scorecard and strategy that Steve and team are working on to make sure that we're encompassing a broader look at how we're looking at personal businesses and how we're making those connections, as well as looking at some of the larger economic indicators that would kind of show where we're making an impact. But from my perspective, honestly, I do think that when we're talking about diverse owned businesses, I think that we probably make the most impact when it comes to small businesses as we're talking about wealth creation and passing generational wealth. I think that that's where we make the most impact. And so that's why we're kind of seeing the focus here. So that's.
Thank you, Aileen. Appreciate that. The next slide really talks about the point that Aileen made about MEDC assistance to diverse businesses through fiscal year 2024, the fiscal year now be ending in this month. This is as of July of this calendar year. And we can provide that. And the unit of measure on this is in absolute numbers. Is that correct? Yeah, it's in absolute numbers. Can we make sure everybody has these slides? Okay, great. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So I know that, I want to also leave time for any questions. But our next scheduled meeting is November 19th at MEDC from 10 to 12. I want to give a preview of coming attractions and what the executive committee might expect from that. We will be discussing our metrics and operational plans. You heard Lynn talk about some things that were coming up for this executive committee's approval. But more broadly, you will sort of see how we're going to kick off things for FY 2025. So with that, go ahead, Amy.
I'm just gonna share, we're receiving notification as well, not some of the.
Pause.
Following this meeting, you'll be receiving some notification of some ongoing education that was discussed during the July meeting, and so you'll see a schedule of those if you're interested in participating in any of those topics.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions? Any questions or comments?
Any questions for Quentin or Aileen? Great. Quentin, anything else in the report?
I think the only thing is just continued thanks to you, Mr. Chair, and all the members of the executive committee, and we will endeavor to obviously guard your reputational capital by making sure that we do integrous work. With that, I'll pass it back to you, sir.
Great, thank you. You have an opportunity for executive committee members to raise any items they would like to discuss in open discussion. So if there are any questions, comments, concerns, or observations from executive committee members, please feel free to state your name and raise them now. Hearing none. Thank you for your time today. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. There is one, Mr. Chair. One in the room.
Great.
Yep.
This is Bob McMahon. I just wanted to say thank you and mention the incredible work that the MEDC team has been doing in support of Project Grid in the time period. And it's been an enormous amount of work over many, many months. And it's been a real pleasure to work with you on that. But it has, I've had experience in these projects in other states as well as here. And what you have done and how you have done it has really helped the virtues that you have talked about maintaining as an organization. And as a member of the plant community, I just want to say thank you for that work as well. Because this project, if we're so fortunate as to have it come to Michigan, will be a multi-generationally transformative project for that region and for the state. And I think it's just been a fantastic. And quite frankly, I walked out of my office yesterday and I said, but it has its other side too. I received a few letters, shall we say, as a member of this committee. I walked out of my office yesterday and I looked at my chief of staff and I said, how can you stand to work with somebody who's such a bad person as I am, at least as portrayed in these letters? But that's part of it. I know we all have that. But I just wanted to say thank you. It's been an enormous effort. And however it comes out, we know how we want it to come out, but however it comes out, I feel like the team has done, his work has done a spectacular job in advancing the interests of the region of the state.
Great, thank you, Dr. McMahon. It looks like, is that Bobby Hopewell?
Well,
Yes, Mayor Hopewell.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just was asking Bob if he could tell us what exactly.
Well, since the Detroit News blurted it out.
Yeah, so
I'm not paying attention.
yeah, so we will make sure, the short of the long is, I think if you Google, and we will provide this, the recent articles in the Detroit News and the Cranes Detroit Business, Michigan, among other states, are competing for what will be probably the last major multi-billion-dollar allocation from the CHIPS office in the Department of Commerce. So we are competing for that. You can see the specifics of that opportunity, but it is something that's going to be tremendous during the construction period during as well as the operational period. And there's opportunities as President McMahon mentioned, to transform not only Flint, Genesee region, but the entire state. These types of opportunities are rare, and we want to make sure that Michigan tax dollars that have funded these opportunities in Arizona, Texas, and Ohio fund one right here in Michigan. So we will make sure that we get those articles to you in the follow-up.
What are you doing?
Other President, sorry, Mr. CEO. I don't tend to know everything. And so sometimes I miss something and I just thought there might be somebody else in the room that didn't know, but apparently it's just me. So I'll do my homework better.
Yes, sir.
Chair, I'll not disrupt again. I'll do my homework.
Does anyone else have a comment, question, or observation for open discussion? Great. As Quentin
gonna give me a
mentioned, the
kiss
next meeting
or what?
is at MEDC headquarters on November 19th, 2024. Thank you again for your time today, and we appreciate your service to this executive committee. Travel well.
Oh, he puked again? You sure you want to do that? Yeah, I don't know. It might be good for him. I don't know, baby. Huh?